Only fools rush in.
Everyone knows Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, who once made millions of fans scream with just a hip twist. From immortal hits like Can't Help Falling in Love to the sparkling lights of Las Vegas, his life was like a legendary song that never ended. But few people know that, during the last years of his life, in the middle of the majestic Graceland castle that he owned, there was a door that was always closed. A room that even his closest relatives were never allowed to enter. No ex-wife, no co-stars, no maids, no one except Elvis himself. That room, according to the stories of longtime servants, was the only place where he could disappear for hours. No one knew what was inside. All they knew was that every time he went in there, he became more quiet, more mysterious, and seemed more distant from the world. And then, one day in August 1977, Elvis was found unconscious on the bathroom floor, just steps away from that locked room. He never woke up. After his death, the room became the subject of hundreds of theories. Some said it was a secret vault containing a series of diaries and unpublished recordings. Others believed that Elvis had hidden a fateful contract that would keep him from retiring from the stage. And still others believed something even more sinister, that he had recorded his final moments and hidden them there. Today, the room remains the same, unopened, unaltered, and no filming or photography allowed. Although Graceland is open to the public, it remains strictly off-limits. The question is, why did Elvis never let anyone in? What did he hide behind that final door? And should we open it, or should we leave it forever in the legend? But the truth behind that room is much darker than many people have ever imagined.
Sometimes the most locked doors come from memories that no one touches. Elvis Aaron Presley was born on January 8th, 1935, in a small log cabin in Tupelo, Mississippi, to a family so poor they didn't have electricity or running water. He was a twin, but the older brother, Jesse Garin, died shortly after birth. And from that moment on, Elvis carried an invisible loss, the loneliness of a survivor, forever the other half. Elvis's childhood was spent in small Southern Baptist churches. There, he learned to sing hymns, blending into black chants and white country music. From an early age, music became his refuge, a space that no one could take away from him. Gladys Presley, Elvis's mother, was the only person he truly trusted. Mother and son were so close that many said, Elvis didn't just love his mother, he lived in her. But life was tough. His father, Vernon, was arrested for forging checks, and Elvis moved to Memphis at the age of 13, starting a life in the slums. At school, Elvis was different. Gelled hair, bell-bottom pants, listening to blues instead of pop. He was ridiculed and isolated, but he didn't give up. He kept practicing, borrowing cheap instruments to practice singing. When he was 18, Elvis went to Sun Records to record a song for his mother. The studio staff recalled, he just wanted to make a gift for the only person who ever believed in him. But we heard something beyond our expectations. It wasn't just a voice. It was a door that had just opened, a wounded soul screaming for the light. From then on, Elvis began to enter the world of showbiz. But for him, music was not the spotlight of fame, but the place where he rebuilt a roof, a separate, safe place, like the way his mother used to hug him when he was a child. Perhaps it was from those memories that he later created a private room at Graceland, the only place where the world could not touch him.
When the world wants to touch you, you start building walls. Just months after his first Sun Records release, Elvis Presley became a phenomenon. His deep voice, his bold, hip-swinging style, and his mysterious gaze had America in a frenzy. He wasn't more than a singer. He was a cultural phenomenon, a revolutionary icon. But the price of his meteoric rise to fame was something Elvis was never ready for. In his 20s, he was drowning in a tight tour schedule, contracts controlled by others, and an industry that was trying to turn him into a product. They edited his statements, forced him into meaningless movies, staged relationships to please the media. The press praised Elvis in the press, but at the same time criticized him as the corrupter of America's youth. The only person he trusted, his mother Gladys, began to weaken under the stress and fear of her son being devoured. In 1958, while Elvis was serving in Germany, she died. Elvis collapsed. That was the first time I saw Elvis really break down, a close friend recalled. He screamed and cried like a baby. And from that day on, he was never the same Elvis again. From then on, Presley began to withdraw. Despite being a global superstar, he often retreated to his room, turned off his phone, and avoided contact. Even when thousands of fans were screaming outside the gates of Graceland, Elvis would stand behind the curtains, watching without coming out. And then he began to set up a no-go area in his own house, a secret room to which only he had the key. Servants, close friends, even his wife were not allowed to enter. No one knew what was inside, only that Elvis often disappeared for hours, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes all night. Some called it the underground studio, some called it the safe zone, but Elvis himself called it the part of me that doesn't belong to the public. When the stage lights became too bright, he retreated into the shadows, where no one judged him, no one controlled him, and no one forced him to be Elvis Presley.
Not everyone who lives in a castle is a king. Some people are just trying to escape themselves. In the 1970s, Elvis was no longer the fiery young man with the eyes full of hope. He had entered a different era, quieter, more tired, and most importantly, lonelier than ever. Every night, he still stood on the Las Vegas stage, his usual smile, his voice still full of emotion, but behind the scenes, everything was completely different. Elvis needed dozens of drugs to sleep, to stay awake, to perform, to continue to be himself. Those close to him said he trusted no one. He did not trust doctors. He did not trust managers. He did not trust even old friends who always tried to exploit his image in exchange for money and power. Graceland, once the place he built to escape the spotlight, now became an isolated fortress. And on the second floor of the mansion, that locked room became increasingly the center of all the questions. Longtime friend Joe Esposito once said, "He disappeared into that room more often for longer periods of time. One time, I stood outside the door for 4 hours. When he came out, he didn't say anything. His eyes were red. No one dared to ask questions." The maid recalled, "We weren't allowed to clean in that room. No one had a key. No one was allowed to look. There were rumors that he kept handwritten diaries in there, full of monologues talking about his life,
about his unnamed sadness. Some say he recorded many cassette tapes where he confided in himself as if he were talking to his mother's spirit. There was even a more chilling theory. Elvis used to record his voice as if preparing a last words. The truth is, in his final months, Elvis lived by night, sleeping by day, and that room became the only thing he had complete control over. No one entered. And when Elvis died on August 16, 1977, that door was still locked. People had the key, but didn't dare open it right away, because they didn't know what was inside: an ordinary room or the last remaining soul of the legend.
Sometimes, death doesn't close a story. It just opens up mysteries that no one dares to touch. On August 16, 1977, at around 2 a.m., Elvis Presley was still awake. He was reading a book in the bathroom, meditating as he had done in the last months of his life. A waiter recalled, "He said he was going to rest, but his voice was different that day, as if he was saying goodbye." No one knew what happened behind the bathroom door. It was only when Ginger Alden, Elvis's girlfriend at the time, found him lying motionless on the floor that everything collapsed. Elvis was rushed to the emergency room, but all efforts were in vain. The legend had passed away at the age of 42. And as doctors, police, and relatives bustled around the Graceland mansion, one person's eyes, his personal manager, stopped at the locked door. It was still closed. No word. No one dared to open it. Because that room was the last remaining sacred thing, a place that even after Elvis's death, no one dared to violate. After the funeral, the family decided to open the door. They did not publicly reveal what they saw, but a few years later, a person who worked at Graceland revealed in an interview, there were tapes, there were papers, there was a list of Elvis's unreleased songs written in his handwriting. But the thing that really shook me was a pencil drawing of a little boy crying. In the bottom corner, Elvis had written, "I never really grew up." From then on, that room was locked forever. Graceland was open to visitors. They could see the living room, the kitchen, the recording studio. But the second floor, where the room was strictly off limits. No visitors were allowed in, no cameras, no pictures. And the big question remains, why did a legend live in fear of being touched? Why did he leave everything except one room? And what was inside it that was powerful enough to silence the world?
Sometimes the greatest thing a person leaves behind isn't the legend, but the void they once left. Nearly 50 years after Elvis Presley's death, his name remains an irreplaceable icon. From hundreds of timeless hits to his fashion style, his gaze, his gestures, everything he touched has become a part of pop culture history. Graceland today is a pilgrimage site for millions of fans. People come, lay flowers, stand silently in front of the heart-shaped iron gate, but no one steps up to the second floor. That room remains closed. It is still a space that no one dares to invade, not because of prohibition, but because of absolute respect for the loneliness Elvis once kept to himself. Perhaps the most memorable thing about Elvis Presley is not just his voice or his hip sway, but the fragility hidden behind the light. He once said in a rare interview, "I was never as strong as people think. I just sang to keep from crying." And now, looking back at his life, From a boy born with a dead brother to a superstar engulfed in the spotlight, we realize that room is more than just a place in Graceland. It is a symbol of the hidden corners of each person, where we hide our pain, our hurt, and the parts that no one understands. For Elvis, it was the only room where he could be himself. And perhaps that is why it will never be opened, because it does not need to be understood, only appreciated.